What is going on, y'all? This is the Cave Fan. I'm here with Football with Oz Austin for episode 51 of Against the Blitz. Another deep dive episode. Haven't done one in a few weeks, but there were a good handful of teams we wanted to touch on this offseason that have a lot of questions, a lot up in the air and left for the brain to be creative with. So today we are doing the New York Jets, and we're very, very pleased to have on Matt O'Leary. He's host of the Just Jets podcast, the Up the Turnpike podcast. If you're an Islanders fan, he's into hockey, which I love. Austin refuses to watch it. I'm a poor Sabres fan, so yeah, we can save that for another day. But yes, I'm glad we have a fellow hockey lover here. But Matt, thank you for joining us. Feel free to introduce yourself. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Matt O'Leary. I cover the New York Jets on YouTube. You can find my channel at Matt O'Leary NY. We're doing daily videos right now, doing training camp breakdowns. So,
oh, really cool.
Yeah, dedicated stuff to be doing things daily like that. Yeah. So, really, really good work over there. So, all of that stuff will be down in the description below. All of his links will be every podcast that he does. He does a ton. So, be sure you do check it out. Anything New York related, he's probably on the case for. So, Austin, what do we got on tap for the Jets today?
What we got is we're going to go position by position, maybe even coaches, maybe even a few other things, and just kind of have a question or a statement about probably like the biggest headliner or the most underrated thing about each room or a really underrated addition that they made. And we'll just have a few questions, a few statements, and we'll go from there.
Cool. All right. Well, I feel like we should probably start at the top, right? I mean, the one big move that the Jets did.
Well, I was going to ask about the uniform concepts that have came out. Have you guys seen those yet? Like the Gothic and style, like uniform concepts. Those are sweet.
Yeah, really looking forward to those coming out. I think they're going to wear them 3 times this year. I've heard that they're going to be gray. I saw a green concept, which looked awesome, but I know it's going to say Gotham City on it somewhere. But it's interesting. I like it.
Yeah, Batman. Like I think New York with the new regime, like taking like a Batman feel to it, is the coolest thing you could ever do with like an Aaron Glenn team.
That fits perfect. Oh yeah, this looks nice. I see a lot of concepts coming out, but yeah, I think you're right. I think it is leaning more toward that green. Yeah, these are nice. Wow, I thought these were just like fan made ideas, but they're actually doing this.
I put it on my Twitter, and you didn't. That just shows you don't read my Twitter, but
all right, buddy. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes I don't. I'm a busy guy, damn it. But whatever. Right. I do like them though. Gotham City, it's a pretty cool thing to play on.
Well, the thing I mean, I'm not a New York Jets fan. I'm not super into New York stuff, but to me, just off of feeling alone with new head coach Aaron Glenn, this feels like the best locker room feel the New York Jets have had in quite some time. Is that something you're noticing too?
Yeah, 100%. I think going from the Robert Saleh era into Aaron Glenn, there's been a noticeable change. I think, the last couple of years, it was really more Aaron Rodgers' team than it was Robert Saleh's team. But with Glenn, it's very clear that they're going to have an identity that's built around their head coach. And, he's very much so preached a physical brand of football. They want to play fast. They want to run the ball. They want to be aggressive. And, he's a former New York Jet. So I think the fan base is kind of rallied around that too, similar to, Dan Campbell goes in Detroit. And there's a bunch of other guys who've now in the league who are coaching for teams that they played for. But yeah, the culture is the thing that they're really focusing on a lot right now, and just trying to create a new identity for this team as they're turning it over at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the whole culture has been the thing with the Jets over the last couple of years. Like, it was, as you said, Aaron Rodgers' team. It was whatever the Jets could do to appease Aaron Rodgers, they were going to do. And that reached as far as, the coaches, the players they brought in. I mean, it was pretty apparent, which to some extent, I know that some people would argue, yeah, you want to make your quarterback happy. He's the most important player on the team, the whole 9 yards. But that was literally like panhandling, doing whatever they could to quite literally appease him. I mean, that was bad. And I would imagine for players inside the locker room, it was quite frustrating at times, which no one ever said, though, that was the weird part. And that's the thing about Aaron Rodgers, not to talk about old news, but no one ever that's played with him says too much bad about him, if anything. It's very weird. Like everything's positive.
Yeah, at first it was very much so like the team trying to recruit him. Even like Brees Hall and Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson all were like making videos and trying to get him to come here. But and you're right, they hired Nathaniel Hackett to be the offensive coordinator. They bring in guys like Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb the first year. And they were in a desperate spot. They missed really badly on the number 2 pick, and they felt that they had a good young core of guys that they found in the 2022 draft, and were trying to go the veteran quarterback route. We saw, the Rams brought in Matthew Stafford and they were able to win, and Brady going down to Tampa Bay, and the Jets were trying to recreate that. Unfortunately it didn't work, but they were leaning into trying to appease Aaron Rodgers, because they were pretty much out of options, because it was very obvious that Zach Wilson wasn't the answer.
Yeah. I mean, I was a fan of it. I thought they were going to be a problem. So I think there were people out there that were only being pessimistic because it was the Jets and it just has to go wrong. But that wasn't a justifiable reason at all. Like I was terrified as a Bills fan. I had them beating the Bills in the division. I had them being contender in the AFC. Like I was in on the Jets, going into that first season. So, and had he not gotten hurt, who knows how that all goes down. So,
yeah. I mean, I think the thing that kind of went wrong to me was kind of what you were saying about Rodgers, where it almost felt like Rodgers was just recruiting his guys. It was Rodgers' team. And I feel like the Jets had decent players on paper, but there wasn't an identity to the team. So they were just collecting decent players, but there wasn't really a route for them to go. But now with Fields, with the stacked running back room, with the new offensive line, like it does finally feel like Justin Fields fits the new identity of this team perfectly. Electric rusher, good character. Like it just screams positive.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And with Justin Fields, like, he's going into his 5th year, still a little bit of an unknown. Like, I'm not going to come on here today and declare that he's the long-term franchise, quarterback, but I think the Jets have put him in, a relatively good spot. It's, up to him to prove that he either is or isn't the guy. You mentioned the offensive line, adding another first-round pick to that unit. I think that's going to be a strong suit on this team. I'm big fan of the running back room with Brees Hall and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, and wide receiver room's a little bit on the weaker side outside of Garrett Wilson, but I think you got to feel pretty good about Garrett Wilson being your number 1 receiver. So for a guy like Justin Fields, this is one of the better circumstances that he's been in. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in this offense and under this head coach.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, Fields, I don't know, like in Pittsburgh, I don't want to say he got the short end of the stick, but, I think he was playing about as well as he could have been at the time and still got put on the bench for Russ, which was a controversial move at the time. You could argue it worked out, but this is, I would say, an even better situation. I think Aaron Glenn and the Jets are moving with a lot more upward momentum than the Steelers have been for the last few years. And, going from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson is as stark of a difference as you can kind of transition from. But now this is Fields' team. The vision is with Fields under center. So I did want to ask, though, when that whole toe injury or, lower body, foot injury, all that drama was going down, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your concern level with the team without Fields, if it came down to it?
Yeah, like an 8. It was good. There was some real PTSD there. I think just on how it was reported, right? Like at training camp, it wasn't open to the public, so you just had to go off the beat reporters, and it was the wording was non-contact, lower body. He stood up and sat down and then rode on the cart back to the locker room, which that doesn't sound good. And mind immediately went to Achilles. We just saw this a couple years ago with Rodgers in week 1, against Buffalo. And then when Aaron Glenn, I think, spoke to the media after practice and he said toe injury, started to feel a little bit better, thought that's not nearly as bad. And then, the next day was out on the field, didn't participate a ton, but then by this past Monday, he was a full participant. So really ended up being just a few days that, sidelined him to an extent. So I would say best case scenario there for, the injury.
Yeah, definitely. That that I just am reliving that with Maxwell Harrison with Buffalo. It's the same kind of thing this last 24 hours. It's been hell on Bill's Twitter because one account in particular tweeted out a couple hours before anything was confirmed that he did tear his ACL, and everyone was freaking the hell out. And then it came out that he didn't, and then that poor account has been getting shredded, like shit on for the last like 2 hours now. Like the ratio of replies to likes is like 2 to 1. It's
deserved though if you're
situation.
lying.
Yeah,
if
right.
You're lying.
Exactly.
Yeah, if I went on and said Fields like shredded his Achilles, I just lied about it. I deserve to get like, attacked.
Yeah, that's on you at that point.
Yeah, literally.
But I do gotta ask, because I think I am the biggest fan of this player in the universe. How much does Isaiah Davis fit into this team? Like, can we make it like, can he get more involved like he was later in the year?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought him up because I thought he looked really good down the stretch last year. And unfortunately for Isaiah Davis, I think Brees and Braylon are still going to be ahead of him on the depth chart. But with the sheer volume of rushing that I think this offense is going to be in, like, he's going to get his chances. And if he's performing well, I think they'll give him the ball more. And, we don't know if the season, doesn't start off great. Brees Hall's on an expiring contract. There's a world where maybe the Jets are sellers at the deadline. And if they trade, Brees Hall, then Isaiah Davis' role is going to be a lot bigger because then he goes to RB2 and Braylon Allen, moves up a spot to RB1. So I like the physicality that he brings. I think both he and Braylon Allen are both bigger style backs while Brees is a little bit more finesse. So I think they complement each other well. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with Isaiah Davis last season. I didn't really have very high expectations for him. Braylon was the back last year that was, covered a lot more and was more the high profile guy in that draft of the two. But I thought he had a promising rookie campaign.
Yeah.
Well, all the fantasy players like myself are wondering, is Brees Hall going to be the primary snap holder, or is this going to be a complete split? Like, what should I do in the third round when Brees Hall is staring me in the face and begging me to draft him? Do I avoid him because he's going to be splitting, or is he going to be the guy?
I think they're going to split carries. I think in a perfect world, they're going to have a, similar kind of style that the Lions do with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think, the Jets want Brees to be their version of Jahmyr Gibbs, which I don't know if he's going to put up that kind of production, but he would worry me a little bit for like fantasy purposes, just because, you get down by the goal line. I think, Braylon comes in and starts eating away at some of those touchdown totals. Although I will say with Brees, the upside to me really comes with him as a pass catcher. I think he's probably going to be the number 2 guy in receptions on this team behind Garrett Wilson, which has been the case the last couple of years. You just look at, having a rookie tight end. Wide receiver 2 right now is Josh Reynolds. I just think they're going to be, dumping the ball off a lot. And, last year they did this a little bit. I'd like them to do it a bit more. They'd line up Brees as a receiver or in the slot. And I just think, with Tanner Engstrand coming in from Detroit, they could take some of those concepts where they'd have Jahmyr Gibbs lined up as a receiver and try to implement that here with Brees Hall and the Jets.
Tanner Engstrand, I want to expand on him just for a brief moment. Do you feel like, I heard this talked about on Locked On Jets recently, is there any concern level with the fact that the Jets chose to go with the man that's name is slipping me right now, but basically let Engstrand go, who could have been the next man up as offensive coordinator, and let him walk? It's kind of like, what do they know kind of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point and a fair criticism to bring up. Detroit brought in John Morton, I believe, who's a veteran OC that Dan Campbell really likes and I believe has worked with in the past. They may have crossed paths in New Orleans together. It's escaping me now, but besides the point, it is a fair argument to bring that up. And it is a first-time play caller at the NFL level. He's called plays at the collegiate level, but just hasn't in the NFL yet. So there is some inherent risk there. There are, stories and reports that have come out on him in Detroit. And I think what excites me the most is, while obviously Ben Johnson's the brains of that Detroit offense, the whole operation, the role that Tanner Engstrand had was, one, he was a pass game coordinator, but also when they were installing new plays, he was the one communicating with each positional group on essentially what their roles were for each, new play that they were implementing. So I think his, the communication skills that he has in order to do that job, I think could potentially translate well now as an OC. It's just kind of up to, we know he can do that, but now can he call plays and design an offense? So yes, there's a little bit of an unknown, but there's also some optimism surrounding him as well. And it's hard to get worse than Nathaniel Hackett. So
yeah,
true.
And that's why I like taking a swing, because you're not a team that's expecting, to dominate right away. Like, you don't need results right now for the New York Jets. Like, this is a time where you can take a swing on an offensive coordinator that could be really, really good. So instead of going after the Hackett's of the world that have proven they're just mediocre at best, going after someone that was so involved in one of the best offenses in the league the last few years, I think it's a great pick. He was one of my personal favorite OC picks this whole cycle.
Yeah, I think that's, a good point to bring up too, is like they had an opportunity to take a big swing. And, they did that not with Nathaniel Hackett, but when Robert Saleh came in, he brought in Mike LaFleur, who was with the San Francisco 49ers. They came in together. He was an unproven guy. And then he ends up kind of being the scapegoat because Zach Wilson doesn't work out. And, he goes to the Rams now. He's been their OC the last 2 years. And, I get it. Sean McVay's calling plays and they're in a much better situation. But by all, indications, he's, doing a fine job out there with Sean McVay. So, again, like I keep saying, it's risky to hire a first-time coordinator. But if there was ever a time to take a swing, I do think it makes sense for the Jets right now.
Yeah, and it was the same thing with defense. Like, the defense was in a point in time where, like, they don't really need to take a swing. The defense has the personnel to be really, really good. So they went after Steve Wilks, who's like an actually proven defensive coordinator in this league. Like, they're not taking any risks there, which I also really appreciated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think from the defensive side, like, totally understand that's where, Aaron Glenn comes from. But I do think it's good to have a veteran on the staff too, right? Like, it's important to have someone that you could lean on. And I think that's the exact kind of role that we're going to see him in this year.
I feel like
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like this could be a complete misfire, but a lot of defensive coordinators I feel like they're more recycled than offensive coordinators are, maybe. I don't know if that's actually true, but like the guys that come to mind are like Jim Schwartz, for example, and like Vance Joseph. I think he's bounced around quite a bit. Like, a lot of those guys do get opportunities and flourish in other situations, maybe more than offensive coordinators do. And like I said, I just think of more guys in my head, defensively speaking, than I do offensively, which, with that being said, I think going the route of Steve Wilks was probably the better one to go with, especially with such a good defense too. It's like having somebody that has proven that he knows what to do with talent that he has on his team. That's a big deal, because we've already seen this defense underperform with a guy that was way in over his head, when Jeff Ulbrich had to take over. So,
yeah, that's a good call out too. And what's interesting too, with, going from Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich to now Steve Wilks and Aaron Glenn, very different philosophies. Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich was essentially, we're going to rush four and play zone coverage, and we're just going to get home with our front four, where both Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks are much more aggressive. I think we'll see them blitz a lot more this year, which is honestly something like I'm welcoming that change. I think from a personnel perspective, when you have linebackers with speed like Jamian Sherwood and Quincy Williams, it makes sense to have them blitz and get after the quarterback. And with Sauce Gardner as a number one corner, you'd like to see him more in man and have him travel with teams' number one receivers. That's not really something that they had him doing under Robert Saleh, and I do think it is something that he could handle. So interested to see if they implement more man coverage into their philosophies on defense now too.
Really cool. Yeah, I mean, so moving on to the pass catchers, this was the biggest question I had the entire offseason. In the fourth round, they chose Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith, when there were some guys I really liked. I like Jalen Royals, Eli Ayumanor, Torrey Horton, and they chose more of like a project gadgety, like scheme specific type of receiver, like looking back, do you like the pick, or do you wish they might have gone somebody else?
At the time, I couldn't stand the pick, and it was one of my least favorite selections they made in this past draft. I thought, he was a 6th, 7th round guy that they took in the 4th round. So that was a little on the frustrating side. But to his credit, he's looked pretty good in camp so far. They seem to really like the speed element. Like, we know he has incredible speed. The issue really for him at Georgia was the hands, right? The drop issues. So they're going to have him, in my opinion, really push the field and try to stretch the field, right? Because they're a run heavy team. We know Garrett's going to be a target hog, but I think they're going to almost really use him as someone who's more of a decoy and just, pushing defenses back a little bit. And, maybe once a game, once every other game, you try a deep shot to him just to push guys back a little bit. But to be honest with you, that wasn't a pick that I loved. The Arian Smith wasn't really one of my top prospects or targets for the Jets at that point. But I will be fair on it. He has looked better than I anticipated so far in training camp, and probably will settle in as the 4th or 5th receiver on this Jet depth chart.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at the full depth chart right now, like Malachi Corley, Tyler Johnson. These are the guys behind Reynolds and Lazard, and they're completely different football players than Arian Smith. They're like guys like Corley, they stay closer to the line of scrimmage. They're not really, deep pushers. And Arian Smith is probably the fastest person on this roster right now. So I do see the element where like you just need somebody to complete the wide receiver room, and he does that.
Yeah, for sure. And you said it. The guys, the other ones listed, like Lazard and Reynolds, they're very similar. They're like contested catch guy, big body, blocking wide receiver. Garrett's a little bit unique, but then everyone else is kind of underneath or gadget guys. So, I think Arian Smith does provide them something that they don't really have. Again, I am still a little bit concerned if his game translates to the NFL with some of the drop issues that he's had, but I see the vision. I just don't like when they decided to make that pick, the draft allocation, if you will.
Yeah.
It's very Lions-like to go and get their guys. They love to do that. And Aaron Glenn's carrying that right on over to New York. Like, they did it themselves. Detroit did it themselves, with like Isaac Tesla this year, guys in the past. And now Glenn's carrying it over. So, I mean, it worked for them. So,
yeah. I mean, if they can get their version of Jameson Williams, so be it. That would be incredible.
Well, that makes me wonder, with the lack of perhaps a number 2, what does Mason Taylor's role look like in this offense then? Does he kind of emerge quickly? Because he's out of all of the rookie tight ends in just as good of an opportunity to be involved in his respective offenses, like a guy like Colson Loveland, who I would argue he could be higher on the pass catching depth chart in New York than Loveland would be in Chicago. So what do you think his role looks like year 1, and what kind of production would you say you're expecting?
Yeah, he's going to be the starter. I mean, you look at the rest of that tight end room, it's not very good. So Mason Taylor is projected to start. He's had a strong start to camp. I think especially the last couple years with guys like Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers coming in and putting up really insane numbers that we don't usually see from rookie tight ends. There's, maybe some in the fan base that's getting a little over their skis, but I think he's probably somewhere 3rd or 4th in targets this year on this team. So maybe that's 45, 50 catches in the 5 to 650 yard range, and hopefully a few touchdowns in there, which, probably puts him somewhere middle of the pack, which I would take in year 1 if, he comes in as just an average level starting tight end. I think that's promising. I do think he has more upside than just that, but I don't think it's fair expectations for someone who's still 20 years old. He's on the younger side in this league too, to just come in and hit the ground running, but pretty optimistic about the potential that he does have, especially in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, there really is nothing else there at all. Jeremy Ruckert,
No.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Stone Smart.
Stone
Zach
Smart,
Kuntz.
Zach Kuntz, I was big
RAS.
on in 2023,
RAS,
but
The Ras
Yeah.
King right there.
The Ras King.
yeah, Old Dominion. Wow. But yeah, my next one, addressing the O-line, it's not really a question, but it's more of a statement. because I feel like the general feel around, like if I say the word Jets offensive line, people think bad immediately. But on paper, looking at all 5 positions, I am really optimistic about each individual player for this season. So that's why I'm like wanting to ask you is like, do you think like this has potential to be one of the better lines in the NFL if all of these guys can kind of mesh together?
Yeah, if everyone plays up to their potential, I do think that they could be a top 10 offensive line in the league. I think, you look at it from left to right. You have, Olu Fashanu, first round pick from a year ago. I thought when he came in to replace Tyron Smith, the offensive line looked better in the second half of the year. I think, yeah, unfortunately for Tyron, he was pretty much just done by the time, the regular season rolled around last year. John Simpson was a great addition at left guard. He just plays with a nasty streak. I'm a big Joe Tippmann guy. They're kind of saying that it's a competition right now between him and Josh Myers, but I don't see it. I don't think they're particularly close. I would say Tippmann's a top half of the league starter, where Myers is maybe replacement level at best, but fine depth. But I don't really think he should be starting over Joe Tippmann. And then you have, AVT, who went healthy, very good, settled in at guard, has bounced around between, both tackle spots and left guard and right guard, but finally kind of settling in, and is a really good player when healthy. And then, Armand Membu, for another first round pick added to this offensive line. I think his ability in the run game is what really excites me about him, especially in this system and with this team. It might take him a little bit in pass protection, but the athleticism between guys like Membu and Tippmann and, AVT and Simpson, like thinking of those guys getting out in space in the run game, I think it'd be really successful for this offense.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I've been really wrapping my head around, the last week or so doing, some research on the Jets is like everything makes so much sense about how they attacked this offseason. Like they didn't just go after random players. Like they didn't just do the best right tackle available. They did the one that made a ton of sense for this new regime and for a rushing offense. Like it is the perfect fit for Brees. It's the perfect fit for Braylon Allen. It is the perfect fit for Fields. And I think that this is the most optimistic I've been about the Jets in a little bit.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from on that for sure. I mean, for me personally, I think when Aaron Rodgers first said he wanted to come to the Jets, like that was peak optimism. But after, last season and how things ended, Jet fans were rightfully pretty down on the team and the organization. But it feels like, we were talking at the beginning about having an identity. It very much so feels like the Jets are trending in a direction where what they are. They're gonna play good defense. They're gonna be a run heavy team. They'll be physical, which is fine. I'm totally good with that. But I think there is optimism in the direction that it's going, even if it doesn't necessarily hit in year one. But I think maybe a year or so out from potentially ending this playoff drought.
I think we lost your audio there.
Hello.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I look at the Jets offensive line and it reminds me in some way like the Sabres young players. Like for years, all we say about the Sabres is how they have so many young prospects, so many good players that are young, that are up and coming. And in just a few years, this team is going to boom. And it's kind of the same thing with the Jets offensive line. Like the oldest guy is Simpson. He's 28. And other than that, we have two guys under 25. No, 3 guys under 25, and Tucker's only 26. So this is a unit that if it really does come together, you're looking at like 4, 5, 6 years, best case scenario, of a group that is playing top 5 offensive line football together. So that's the most intriguing part to me is just how young they are, how much optimism there is. And if it all comes together, you have, in my opinion, the most important part of your team figured out and playing cohesively for years. So that's huge.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the biggest reasons for me, at least, for optimism on this team and the direction that they're going is the youth of that unit. There's just been so much turnover for years now on that offensive line, just trying to figure out spots. And you have a couple guys who stick for a couple years and then they move on. Like Morgan Moses was a pretty good stopgap that they had in 2 different stints. George Fant, they had the corpse of Dwayne Brown for a couple of years, but It's nice to finally feel like you have a group who, hopefully they stick together for, like you guys were saying, for a few years and build up that needed chemistry, right? Offensive line, you're playing as a unit. It's not just one guy going out there and doing a job. So the more that you play together, the more cohesive that it could be.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Bills would know. The
Yeah.
Bills don't have really many stars. They have Dion, and then otherwise it's just a unit. Same kind of
Exactly.
deal.
Yeah. And I've talked a lot of good. So the only bad that I will say, the only critique that I have for this offseason is looking at one particular spot on the defense, and that is the defensive tackle room. Because I am a humongous Quinnen Williams fan, but you can't rely on one individual man. And after Quinnen Williams, I'm not a huge fan of what I'm looking at least as an outsider. But as like a Jets fan, like, do you see a second or a third name that you are a fan of here?
Yeah, and that is a very, very fair criticism. If you're looking at weaker spots on this team, interior defensive line outside of Quinnen Williams is a weak spot. Byron Cowart's the name who's probably going to play the most next to Quinnen Williams. Kind of limited role last year with the Bears, but I thought played okay. And he's definitely looked the best in camp besides Quinnen in that unit. Derek Nottie, they brought in from the Chiefs. He's more of like an early down run stopping guy that you use in rotation. Leonard Taylor was a UDFA last year who I thought played really well last summer, was okay in limited snaps during the regular season last year. But I think at this point, he's more of like a pass rush specialist on the interior. I don't think his game is well-rounded enough yet to be considered a starter and playing over 50% of snaps. So there's a couple, like Leonard Taylor provides the highest ceiling, but I don't know if the floor is at a point where they feel comfortable giving him those reps. But Coward's really the name that you're going to see the most next to Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of I guess the Jaguars defensive line is still interior. That one's bad. This isn't quite that level because Quinnen Williams is around, but there definitely is some depth issues. And I guess, at least in my opinion, I do have my own concerns about who else is getting after the pass rusher. I mean, Will McDonald, 11 sacks last year he did have.
Yep.
But at least to my understanding, it wasn't necessarily a game-wrecking 11 sacks. It was more of like a cleanup type of role. Do you think there is some sort of ascension from Jermaine, or does Will kind of take that next step into being that one-man army on the outside? Like, where are the pressures going to come from in this Aaron Glenn defense?
Yeah, so Will McDonald coming off, a strong season last year, sack-wise, he was very streaky, which I think was maybe the frustrating part with his game. But he's actually put on a little bit of weight this offseason, but the speed doesn't seem like that's gone away. And I think maybe a critique you could have of his game his first 2 years was he's kind of one-dimensional as a speed rusher. But now, he's been showing it off too in camp against Armand Membu, a little bit of a bull rush that he's been winning with. So really hoping for this defense to hit the ceiling. They need him to be a more well-rounded edge. I like Jermaine Johnson a lot. I don't think he's, super flashy and going to be a guy who gives you like 12 sacks in a season, but he's strong against the run, probably in that 6 to 8 sack range guy, but he's coming off a big injury. So I don't know if he really hits his stride into the second half of the year. And we were just talking about, depth issues on the interior. I think from edge 3 and beyond is a little scary town with, Michael Clemens right now is running with the ones. And then you have, some other guys like Rashad Weaver, who's bounced around the league, and you drafted Tyler Barron late, but I don't really know, how much he's going to give you as a rookie out of the gate. So they really need Jermaine Johnson to get healthy sooner rather than later. I like the top 2 guys, but beyond that, I think the depth is lacking a little bit right now.
It is. And something that I've also kind of noticed from an Aaron Glenn defense, at least, is pressure doesn't just have to come from the D-line. And I think that they have the perfect linebacker room to just get after people. I think Quincy Williams and Jamie Sherwood are both awesome athletes, very different, but really good athletes in their own way. And while Jamin Davis might not have been the first-round linebacker we had hoped, people were trying him out at edge rusher because he's such a good, big athlete. So I do feel like if they really want to generate pressure elsewhere, they have the guys.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with, Steve Wilkes coming in and this Aaron Glenn scheme in comparison to Robert Saleh. I do think they're going to be much more blitz heavy this year. And, Quincy Williams with his sideline to sideline speed, the few times they did turn him loose, under Robert Saleh, especially the last 2 years, it worked really well because of, the speed and the power that he has. Davis is another good example that you brought up. I think he does make the team and is used in a blitzing linebacker role. Jamie Sherwood's a converted safety, so a little bit different, right? Like he has the sideline to sideline speed, but I don't know if he's like really big enough to be a linebacker blitzer. Up the middle or the A gap, probably not, but maybe you get him coming around the edge. There's ways that they can get creative with it, I think is the point to try to scheme some more sacks in this unit.
I mean, Aaron Glenn was getting pressure with like who knows who at the end of last year. Like the group that he was running with after all the injuries was just like anybody put on some pads, and somehow Aaron Glenn is finding a way to make it look like Hutchinson never really left. Like, of course he did, and it was noticeable, but the fact of the matter was he made it work with who he had. And that's kind of my thing too. It's like you bring in a guy like Aaron Glenn and, I trust he's going to figure it out with the defense. It's kind of like the same feel that you had when Robert Saleh came in. I mean, that was kind of how there was like that general feel that Saleh's coming from the 49ers. He's got a good head on his shoulders defensively. And, there's talent here, which also helps, but you trust that he's going to put whoever it is in the right position to be successful. So as much as there are depth issues and, maybe star power problems on the front four defensive line, I think Aaron Glenn is going to make it work.
Well, I think kind of like what you were saying earlier, the amount of pressure they're going to be putting on people, you kind of have to play a different philosophy with your corners. And, corner Sauce Gardner, like he's been the biggest name on the Jets for some time now since he's been in the league. And he's gotten a lot of really weird, unnecessary criticism from people, which I don't understand. But like, I am really, really excited about a role where he doesn't have to be running around as much, or he doesn't have to be guessing as much, like just playing man-to-man with quick pressure. Like I think that he has a chance to come back to pure Sauce form that people know him and love him for.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment because I use Sauce Gardner as a ball knowing test, and you passed the test. There is a lot of social media hate that goes towards Sauce Gardner, and look, I get it. Last year, to his standard, he wasn't what he was his first 2 years. With that said, he was still a borderline top 10 corner in a down year. He's a really damn good player and got a contract extension that he deserved. But you're right. Like if he's even 80% the player that he was the first 2 years in his career, he's a really, really good cover corner with the size and the speed that he has. He needs to create more turnovers. I think he would admit that. And that's something that he's been working on with Aaron Glenn. But from a scheme perspective, I think it's a perfect fit for a guy like Sauce Gardner, who with his coverage skills should be really good in man. And, it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but I was going to make a drawback to, honestly, the last time the Jets were successful under Rex Ryan, they had Darrelle Revis and they blitzed like crazy and they left him on an island and he was able to shut down, top wide receivers. And I think it's going to be a more modern version of that, but similar in the sense that, they're not going to be able to get home with their front four. So they're going to have to get creative and blitz, and they're going to rely on their corners to be locked down in coverage.
Yep. And I think some people are scared because they saw Brandon Stevens last year get torched in Baltimore, but I don't think they're looking past him on the depth chart because AZ Thomas plays that big physical long role that people love in New York, but I kind of think people forget he's there.
Yeah, I mean, we're on AZ Thomas watch here in New York with the Jets because was not expecting him to make it to the third round where the Jets grabbed him. I personally was not a huge fan of the Brandon Stevens signing with the contract that he got, just because the year he was coming off of. If he's closer to the 2023 version of himself, I think he's fine as a number 2 corner. Last year was really rough though, but they have a pretty good contingency plan now where if, first few weeks of the year, Brandon Stevens is looking like, 2024 Brandon Stevens. Then you have a guy like AZ Thomas who might be good enough to play right now, but is kind of blocked. I do think Thomas is the long-term answer here. I don't know what they do with Stevens. You could theoretically get out of the deal after year 2. But this might be a scenario where Steve Wilkes and Aaron Glenn, we just got to get this kid on the field, and whether it's using him as like essentially a third safety out there in lighter packages or what, I don't know what the plan would be, but I do think he pushes to get on the field at some point this year.
Really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be an opportunity where Brandon Stevens will screw up enough for AZ Thomas to at least get a legitimate shot to take over that job. It feels like not a matter of if, it's more of a matter of when, for a guy like Brandon Stevens, unfortunately, especially if they're playing as much man coverage as we're projecting, like it will only be a matter of time.
I do remember, like you said, 2023, Brandon Stevens was like legitimately good. Like he was a legitimately solid, good, big physical athletic corner. And for some reason, he just fell apart last year. So if like what you were saying, if he can find that again, that would be awesome. But yeah, I do have my reservations if he's anything like last year.
Yeah, 100%. And, like I was saying, again, not a huge fan of the signing because of the year that he was coming off of. Feel a little bit better about having the contingency plan of AZ Thomas to just pull the ripcord if you need to. And if you got to bite the bullet, just eat the contract or whatever, you do it. But yeah, that's definitely a spot we're going to be keeping a close eye on for sure, is that cornerback too.
Yeah. And then to kind of go along with the whole foundation of what I've been talking about with the Jets, with having a good vision, I like the vision of at least the starting DB room, because you have your corners and you look at your outside guys. They're long, physical, mean. You have your nickel and Michael Carter. If he can just stay healthy, you have a really good chess piece there. And you have a really good chess piece in Malachi Moore, rookie from Alabama, who's not like a traditional safety in any way, but he's a really good guy you can move around. And then to bring in Andre Sisco, kind of play the over-the-top like center field role, I think you have a really, really good creative room here.
Yeah, I agree with you. Michael Carter, unfortunately, last year he was fighting through injury the entire year, even before the regular season rolled around during training camp. He just had a nagging injury and was really never right. But I think when healthy, one of the better slot corners in the NFL. So assuming health, which all indications are that he's healthy and good to go, I think he's fine. Andre Sisco is, outside of Justin Fields, I think maybe my favorite addition that the Jets made this offseason. He's local. He's from Long Island, so that's kind of a cool story to throw on top of it. Grew up a Jets fan, and now I just think he's going to be, a better replacement for what they had at the position a year ago, and hopefully someone who can create some turnovers, because that's been an issue for this team. Even when their defense has been strong, they don't really create a ton of turnovers. But with Sisco's game kind of playing more, like you were saying, that deep back, I think that's an area where we could see some improvement. And I think Malachi, we talked about Arian Smith being my least favorite pick. Malachi Moore was my favorite day 3 pick by far. I thought that was great value. Ton of starting experience at Alabama. He's an older prospect, so I think he can handle playing early. And with how the rest of that room looks, he's kind of competing with Tony Adams and Isaiah Oliver for that starting safety spot. I think Malachi Moore ends up winning that job. And he's another one who, when the pads came on this week, we started to see his name pop up a lot more. Comes down to the line of scrimmage and makes plays, tackle for losses, physical. He seems to fit the brand and identity that they're trying to play with.
Yeah, right. I think too, maybe if there is that way that Glenn can find that pressure up front, like a guy like Sisco, I mean, there was not much going on in Jacksonville. Like it was tough for a player like him to really make an impact, because that role does kind of rely on mistakes made, caused by your teammates and by your defensive front. And now if you are able to be a part of an operation where there's a lot more disruption, I do think a guy like Andre Sisco can end up being one of the biggest values of a signing of this entire offseason. Like it definitely is an upgrade from what they were working with last year. So that was also one of my favorite, probably my favorite move of the offseason for New York.
Yeah, I featured it in a post. It was one of my favorites of any team in the offseason. It just made so much sense for what they were looking for and for what he was looking for.
Yeah, totally agree. I think this is one of those where not only was it a need for the Jets, right? Like they obviously need to upgrade safety, but the style of player that they found, I think, is exactly what makes sense for an Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes defense too.
Yeah. Only one more position left that I really want to talk about because I think this is actually the best addition the Jets made the entire year. Getting Nick Folk just very, very recently, is incredible. Who is he's been the most underrated kicker in the league the last like 5 years. What are you doing?
I don't know. He just can't. He can kill. He'll hit every 42 and under yarder.
That's incredible.
Which is good. Greg, when you're dealing with Greg, I guess Greg definitely has you guys scarred. So
yeah, I don't know what happened, man. He was great in 2023 and then just fell off an absolute cliff this past year. But yeah, at 96%, I think each of the last 2 years led the league in field goal percentage. It's nostalgic for me, right? It was a Jet from 2010 to 2016. Was on the team when they last made the playoffs in 2010. So maybe some good juju there, bringing the vibes back from 2010. I don't know, man can dream. But I definitely think it's an upgrade. It was kind of a battle between UDFA, Caden Davis, and the thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis, who's still on this roster right now. Who knows? Maybe he sticks on the practice squad, but Nick Folk absolutely should be an upgrade over what they had.
I think Mevis would be really cool for like the modern day kickoff. But like I don't want Nick Folk touching that. But especially if you have like punter Austin McNamara, who's like a little string bean, you definitely want somebody that can make a tackle, and Mevis is your best guy for that.
100%. I'm in.
But Nick Folk has what I think he's 11 of 12 from 50+ yards the last 2 seasons. Like he is automatic. I don't want to hear any Nick Folk slander.
Yeah, he had a 56-yarder last year.
Yeah, he's a beast. I'm telling you, like Nick Folk, it's just because he's ancient and he looks even older than he is, which is why it's like, it's kind of a scary pick, but he was phenomenal.
I think it's just in this day and age of like these younger kickers that are coming up and making 55-yarders halfway up the net. Folk is like barely squeaking it over the crossbar from like 53, 54. Like
that's 3
points. 3 points. You're right. It still is.
Yeah, I'm taking it either way.
Well, like a guy like Greg, like he was kind of the opposite. It's like at least from what I remember, that guy he'll hit you. He'll give you a shot at a 70-yarder, but when it gets closer, it's like, oh my god, like how are you making the 68-yarder and then you're just sailing the 34-yarder? That's the kind of kicker Greg was, and this is the complete opposite in Folk.
Yeah, just give me 3. I don't care about that 60-yarder that I might want twice a year. I just want 3 every time that I cross the 40-yard line.
Yeah, that'd be nice, right? Like just hit the ones you're supposed to hit. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this on an episode recently. There's nothing worse than like getting up to go to the bathroom at the end of a drive and you're just assuming the kick is going to be made, and then you come back and it's like, where the fuck are my 3 points? And it's like, oh, he fucking missed it. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? It's like with Folk, you're probably not going to have to experience.
He will not. He did not. Like he's shooting 94, 96% the last 95, 96% the last 2 years, which I'm pretty sure led the league both years, which is incredible.
Where was he last year again? Was he?
He was in Tennessee the last 2 seasons, and he was in New England the last 4 before that.
Yes. I remember the New England days. I forgot he was in
Tennessee. He was a killer there too.
Well, he probably didn't have to kick much in Tennessee because they just were not in scoring range very often. But one of my final questions for you is about the team's overall projection, because not too many people are high on the Jets, and understandably, but it feels like there's definitely been a complete flip of the coin. Like last year or the year before, everyone perhaps was overrating the roster or giving them expectations that were just too high to clear given the circumstances. Where this year, other than a couple changes at some, of course, big spots, a lot of the talent is still the same, but the projected win total has plummeted. The outlook on the team has plummeted. But I mean, I don't see why this team couldn't be 7 to 8 win team at its ceiling, where it's like I think their win total is 6.5, but that's plus money. I would say it's probably closer to 5.5. Is that a bar that you feel is disrespectful, or do you think it's just right? Like,
I do think 5.5 is low. That's where it opened at. That's where it is. It's juiced like crazy though. You have to lay, I think it's like 150 for the under on that, or the over, whatever it is. I agree with you. I think they're a 7 or 8 win team. I don't think this is a playoff team yet, but I do think the coaching is going to make a big difference, even if some of the big name guys aren't here. And like we've been talking about in this episode, like I think they're trending towards having an identity. I view this as more of like a transition kind of year where you're really trying to get over the hump and end your playoff drought in 2026, whether it's, Justin Fields figuring it out, or if you go to the draft and find a, rookie to implement on this roster that you hope is your answer. But overall, I think they're going to play a lot of, low scoring tight games. They have a good defense. Their offense, I don't think is going to put up a ton of points. But I think they'll be much more competitive than what they were a year ago. So I'm not far off from you guys. I think 7 or 8 sounds about right for this Jets team.
They're going to keep teams in the mud with them. They might play in the mud, but they're going to drag teams into it, and they're going to wrestle. And whoever gets up is going to be the winner. That's the type of game, like you said, tight, low scoring, kind of almost Zach Wilson-esque era games where it just felt like, man, if this offense could do anything, then we'd be winning this game. And I would like to think that this offense will be able to do a little bit more, which makes it difficult for me to understand why there's so much pessimism. I do understand why there's a low win total. I mean, someone in the division has to be at the bottom. And there are just as many arguments as to why you might think the Patriots will be better this year. But I don't know. I think the Jets are foundationally more sound, especially defensively. And we've seen the talent of this group carry them year after year. And what's different?
I'm with you.
Other than that, I don't think I have any other comments. Austin, did you have any other thoughts?
I got nothing. I'm just actually like the more I talk about it now, the more excited I am about the New York Jets. And it might not be in 2024 to 2025, but going forward, I'll be a fan.
Yeah, I totally fair. I get that you're a Bills guy. Totally understand. Bills are going to run away with the division again, and then there'll be 3 teams kind of just mucking it out for 6, 7, 8 wins in that range. It feels like, but I think trending in the right direction. Maybe a year away from being a competitive team.
I would rather be the Jets than the Dolphins right now.
Oh,
I thank you for saying that too. I don't understand the people who still think Miami's going to finish second in this division. I don't see that at all. I don't like where that team is trending right now.
No, that they are certainly not a shoo-in for any sort of placement above 4th. I mean, they have just as many holes in just as many big places, and they're coming off. Talk about a year that was bad. Like that was embarrassing. Like Mike McDaniel almost lost his job. Chris Greer was probably on the hot seat. Like there's a lot more. I think, what is their win total at? I think they're at.
I think we did was like 7 or 8. Was it 7?
7.5, and it's minus 110. Wow. Yeah, that's confusing to me. It's very confusing.
I'm on the under on that one.
Oh, 100%. And then the Patriots are at 8.5, but that's plus 100. Wow. So interesting. 8.5 plus 100.
That one's a tough one. I think they're either an 8 or 9 win team, New England. I think they're right around 500.
Yeah. I mean, I could see the Jets. I could see the Jets and Patriots switching places. Dolphins last, Jets, Patriots duking it out for 2nd and 3rd. One's a 7 win team, others 8, vice versa.
Yep.
But yeah, the AFC East we had our downtime, the Bills did, to just kind of keep running away with it. But, just 2 or 3 years now, it's going to be back to being competitive. So I guess I'll enjoy it while it lasts. But that's really all we got for episode 51. Matt, thank you again for taking the time and bringing a lot of very, very valuable insight. I feel a lot better about the Jets than I did before. I mean, I think I was definitely higher on them than the consensus, but just kind of talking it through and hearing more about what's going on in training camp, a lot of things that I'm not necessarily following on a day-to-day basis like a Jets fan would, I feel a lot better about this team, and I think a lot of other people should be on the lookout. That's absolutely for sure. So make sure you're checking all of Matt's podcasts and all the things he does down in the description below. His Twitter, both his hockey, football podcast. You do baseball too, right? I think kind of.
No, not
Occasionally.
anymore.
No.
I tweet about it, but I don't cover baseball anymore.
Okay, well, I'm sure you can ask him questions if you have them, because I'm sure he could definitely answer them. But anything New York, he is absolutely your guy. So check him out, follow him. All of that will be down below. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, share, and we will see you in episode 52.